Heart of Texas, round 1 versus Strake, Jesuit, VJ.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Whenever you're ready, the email will send. Did you get it, Vincent?
I did.
Okay, cool.
We just pull up the first album. Okay, I'm ready to start.
Are you ready, Vincent?
Yeah.
The contention is computation. Welcome to the end of the world. The culprit of the world computer, of course, stopping the use of computational algorithms as capital's closest allies joined at the hip, not as neutral processes, no, but rather the extension of racial capitalism's code of the world, which locks in fractal fascism, racialized violence, Bauer 21. Capital was always a computer commodification process of encrypting qualities as quantities from racialization information, and state machines impose calculus, experiencing neuropocket world-scale failure to address carceral systems, genocide, militarism, racism, pandemic, anti-blackness, extinction, racial capital rendered democratic governance outmoded, extraction takes the form of fascism, only direct engagement, reprogramming of extraction, secure victory, decolonization, computation, reading and writing of code on bodies, surveillance by overcoding algorithms executed on the flesh by means of codification, violently imposed or reformatting of bodies, abstraction imposed by code of race, functions of predetermined unequal redistribution of global resources, reformatting correlates race and value, imposing this globally encode social difference, slavery, colonialism, state formation, genocide, gender oppression, pogroms, militarization, policing, parasites in pursuit of power as the world computer, inscribing itself on everything else. World computer takes civilizational racism, role extends deeply into capitalist calculation, thus understand generalization of computation as extension of capital that require calculus of social differences, include those powered by racism, computation, recognized as practical result of an ongoing struggle between what have it alls and the to be dispossessed. Local as computation may seem neutral, computation is a result of struggles index, oppression, abstraction emerges as codification, and access to the right to housing is built through financialization by the encoding of racial divides through use of data and supposedly colorblind algorithms to reproduce racial segregation, displacement, and otherization fields in Raymond 21. Financialization understood in terms of racial capitalism through abstraction, hierarchies, organized relations, housing financialization, a site which racial divides are encoded, combines finance, data, and digital tech, technology to perpetuate bias with seeming objectivity, housing incorporates existing divides, creates divisions, algorithms construct racialized character upon which right housing relies, whitest racial other within credit databases based not just on histories but stats that are legacies of discrimination, models price and allocate and deny housing, producing divides, subprime lending in African American neighborhoods, credit scoring, transcribing, and mortgage scoring split, and risk in ways linked to forms of racial dispossession. Banks use redlining maps to segregate non-white places. Redlining was powerful, obscured God's role in segregation, dispossession, displacement, continued communities, classes, low value, high risk, requiring revaluation that results in displacement, serves to drain capital and perpetuate racial wealth gap, valuation systems incorporate race with naturalizing withholding in space coded as non-white, violence inherent to unwilling separation of people from homes, financialization obscures this by introducing intermediaries, naturalizes decay, death of a black sent to space as part of a white supremacist settler socialist spatial dialectic made land productive and profitable. Finance is not new. Finance has long been deeply racialized. Combination with automated and digitized technologies, housing financial solutions reconfigures racism, shifting it into automated systems, and computational capitalism is collapsing around us. It intervenes in planetary systems, which paves the way for new imperial wars and ecological devastation. Mbembe 21. Data extraction becomes key in production processes. Markets understood as determinants of the climate system. Distinction between economic power and political sovereignty is open to debate. Corporations secede while exercising surveillance as global architecture behavior modification driven by states, corporations, and military apparatuses. Our shared infrastructure nervous system maps out psychophysical limits. Nothing escapes its control. Effects, dreams, thoughts. Mining companies unleash vehicles on the seabed. Capital leaves uninhabitable zones. Debris, toxins, waste heaps of humans. A ubiquitous digital architecture become the new Leviathan. Beings embedded in complex technostructure intervening in the Earth system on a planetary scale. Transition to planetary boundaries. Climate change, degenerative land use, biodiversity loss, perturbation of nitrogen and phosphorus, release of nanoparticles, acceleration of extinction, technosphere as part of the biosphere, combined in complex networks, algorithmic intelligence developed, shifting powers between human and technological tied to extraction. Life is a commodity. Corporations intervening directly in ecosystems. Algorithmic intelligence integration brings techno-positivism. Prediction treats life as commutable. Algorithmic logic is the source of perception, moving towards general intelligence. Fossil capital, soft power, war, and saturation of the digital come up against terrestrial limits, and thus, the plan, the United States ought to guarantee a right to housing. Codifying the right to housing as part of the global fight against racial capitalism. Reforms are necessary to challenge the state on its own terms. IR 17. Private housing failing people decline ownership, renters increase, half pay 30% of income in rent, 500,000 are homeless, supply and demand, neglect, not profit to build housing for the poor, build condos for the elite shows this starkly. The problem is capitalism treats housing as a casino, dominated by big business, speculation drives up price, shift effects, POC and single moms depend on private developers to extract as much as possible, not benevolently support improvement to provide relief. Solving housing requires millions of people under idea housing is a human right. Fight for housing, broader struggle of working strongest connected to radical labor movement retains incredible power, and we must recognize that targeted material solutions are required to survive amid everyday instances of violence, as Kotonga 22. Movements focused on non-reformist reforms and dual power, organized cooperatives, still participating in politics, creating own alternatives and transformative justice principles. Don't call the police, offer community-based alternatives, market-based solutions. Failing state bolsters capitalism by invest at the expense of the working response to lack of housing as evictions and surveillance. Police as agents of capitalists to carry out this violence. The anti-state state grassroots work carried out by movement groups. The focus on ordinary people they wish to organize, forcing organizers to struggle for a solution that go beyond getting better state services. Housing advocates have been vigorously agitating against this system conceptualized vision that goes beyond housing reforms and shadow future with permanent support of non-punitive housing for all, the right to housing, and the affirmative combination of revolutionary consciousness and housing generates moments of mutual aid, which transform housing from a site of commodity to one of care and builds new communities as place. Chua 20. The racial and class structures of housing deprivation is inside an economy to the benefit of that economy. Recognize housing becomes transformed from wage into commodity as the wages of racial capitalism. The abolition product is radically imagined social, productive, communal, and community building practice. Housing a site where care and reproductive work can become crucial sides of anti-capitalist. Abolitionist transformation begins from solidarity, not charity. Reformism or policy work is demobilizing, providing no direct relief. Mutual aid provides an alternative that seeks change to dismantle and challenge structures of oppression, calls attention to why that gap is there, widening the horizon of what and who is valued, transform those of relationship, and forms attachment within them. And the plan doesn't claim to end system power critiques on its own, but it paves the way for post-capitalist being by affirming a reappropriation of institutions of domination, starting with housing as part of a greater general strike against computation. Bauer 21. As the plantation and factory institutions for domination phases of revolutionary consciousness consider collectivization of debt, ways we might create non-capitalist becoming, enable oppressed communities to leverage world-making capacities to occupy money, re-engineering computation that our desire can do other than generate content, build an economy that capable of recognizing mutual indebtedness on our contributions that we make, can take down the digital information. Marxism, anti-racist, feminist, queer, decolonial endeavor requires we demonstrate the encroachment of the digital individual codification over 7 centuries, implies acting a new acting season of the means of production, constant reverse subsumption acting that would release aspiration foreclosed by techniques endeavor of global proportion, must make artists all of value, must refuse the digital neither would nor accelerate the production while embracing notion of liberation can only be non-exploitative. Mark the card at non-exploitative. 1 second, and then I'll be ready for cross. Yeah, non-exploitative. Okay. What? The very last card in the affirmative, it's at liberation, non-exploitative. Like one of the last paragraphs. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. The app, what does it do?
The app implements a right to housing.
How?
How? So we'd say that it would take steps to ensure that everyone has housing and that so that no one has to be homeless.
What steps?
Provide permanent housing to everyone in need and criminalization of homelessness.
What does that do about AI?
AI?
Or algorithms?
We've made the claim that the way that housing financialization operates is through algorithmic racism. So this is exemplified by like when we see that certain people from certain demographics are less likely to be given loans by banks and their neighborhoods are seen as inherently less valuable.
Yeah, how does the app solve?
Well, the app is also a move away from financialization because we recognize a human rights-based approach to housing that is distinct from the idea that housing is something to make money.
Wait, say that again?
We recognize a human rights-based approach to housing. So by codifying the right to housing as a right, we recognize that housing is something everyone is entitled to. It is not. What?
Can you just list the things you have to? So, public housing, legal right.
Provide permanent housing, end criminalization of homelessness, prohibit evictions, upgrade settlements, address discrimination,
That's
just like the UN definition.
Wait, okay. The capitalism argument, you say capitalism causes extinction.
Yeah.
You also say you don't solve capitalism?
I don't think that we say we don't solve capitalism. I think we say that the right to housing is an internal link to solving capitalism.
When?
When? What do you mean when? I think that when we say the plan doesn't claim to end it on its own, we're saying that that is an effect, not a mandate. It's a clarification thing.
Okay, in that case, how does right to housing end capitalism?
We think that we've recognized, our Katanga evidence recognizes that movements, dual power organizing movements exist now, but that housing is a missing piece, and that market-based solutions fail, but that in moments where housing has been provided, this is the Chua evidence.
Oh, okay.
That,
yes? Draw up the scenario for me. There's groups right now protesting, fighting capitalism.
But they can't do it.
Because they don't have right to housing?
No, because we've recognized that mutual aid networks have formed in cases like the Minneapolis protests, wherein housing was seen as not a commodity, but rather a site of mutual care, as something that everyone is entitled to.
What does that have to do with getting rid of all of capitalism?
Well, we think that that creates the grounds to strengthen existing revolutionary movements, which is...
Okay, when does that solve capitalism? It sounds like movements already exist.
Yes, but those movements are not, those movements require housing in order to be successful.
Yeah, what about housing makes these movements suddenly get rid of all of capitalism?
They create mutual aid networks that allow revolutionary organizing while increasing existing movements in order to fight back. I think I've just explained it 3 times.
Okay. I guess mutual aid. What is it? Is it 4 or 5 minutes?
It's 5.
Okay. We're gonna prep.
Okay. And here, would you like to use this?
It's okay.
Okay. How many off? 4. Okay.
Four off.
I'll tell you when I have the doc. I'm downloading it. Load. Sorry, the internet's kind of slow here. Alright, I'll open it. I'll tell you in a second. Hold on. Yeah, I'm ready. Yes.
First off, court filings are down over the past year. That's Circular 22. The judiciary released data showing drops in filings across the court systems. The theme was a major slump across every part of the federal judiciary. Across all districts, filings dropped 27%, brought the per judge caseload down. 84% of all districts had smaller caseloads, and vagueness of right to housing created spikes in litigation cases. That's Walter 625. A right to housing, how would it affect the housing crisis? It would force governments to projects require tenant-friendly laws and lead to direct investment full of the vague language that lawyers love because it requires lawsuits and judicial interpretations to have real-world meaning, invite even more litigation on an issue that's already awash in contentious legalism, and when clogs occur, data protection is shelved. That's Haley 20. Standing reduces the workload of the judiciary. Data protection cases promise to be long and involve class actions. They are class actions and complex. Overworked judges might be eager to get cases off their dockets. Data consistent with this have been solicitous in data protection and data breach cases, which present technically complicated inquiries. Courts upheld standing and regulated AI is good and solves extinction. That's EPRS 20. AI is raising concerns humanity may find itself in inferiority. Scientists argue existential risk AI could accelerate textile problems of existence and cosmos, disease, farming, climate, opportunities accompanied by risk, surveillance, manipulation, intrusion in private. AI should be consistent with rights. This requires measures to provide citizens with confidence and legal certainty. Data protection regulation can address AI and implement in ways that are beneficial, and extinction comes first under any framework. That's Palmer 15. Reducing existential risk is the most important thing in the whole world. So many people could exist in the future, trillions upon trillions, and the well-being of these possible people given only decimal series of 1% as much weight. This sort of egoism will apply strong reasons to reduce existential risk. We should also take into account moral uncertainty. Even if we are only 1% sure well-being matters for moral uncertainty, reducing existential risk is the most important thing in the world. All minimally plausible moral views would converge that we should try to save the world, and the role of the ballot is to vote on the desirability of the plan. A is testing. We should test strategies from multiple angles. B is times key, since anything else within 6 minutes of the F. C is only safest point for a clash since I inevitably defend infinite implicit representations that you can indict, but there's only one resolution, and no pre-post fiat extinction, since any argument about the policy of the F determines its representations, and extinction outweighs A superior exit can't help question. If we're all dead, B is consent. Even if life seems bad choice, it should still be up to the individual. C, even if there's no extinction, impact still outweighs, since the scenarios leading up to extinction are going to be worse for people who are already oppressed, and D is it's the common reference. And second is Loretto versus Cadby has upheld the strength of property rights as Lead 21. This Supreme Court held the CDC lacked authority to impose an eviction moratorium that covered the country's intrusion into a traditional domain of law. Even properly authorized moratorium became incredibly costly, preventing from evicting tenants intrudes on the most fundamental elements of property ownership. The right to exclude ban on evictions infringes on property owners' right to exclude others to a much greater extent than Loretto, and rights housing used to justify eviction moratoriums, eviscerating landowners' right to property. That's Greenhut 714. Rights housing has a right to protection from forced evictions and security of tenured landlords would no longer be able to evict if property owner can evict them. They aren't going to invest, aren't going to make repairs to houses, make housing stock less adequate. Such edicts discourage housing investment and causes a domino effect, allowing governments to go on a power trip. That's Project Rami 13. Aim of Constitution is to limit the government positive rights and empower governments to grow without limiting and make trade-offs. Every action must be governed in power specified. The Constitution does not provide a right to everything in housing. Why not a condo? Once the right is guaranteed, government has unlimited power to define and pursue the Constitution, becoming excuse for expanding. Positive rights lose their right to a home. Government build public housing. It would need land by using eminent domain, securing people's rights as a public use of property. The previous landowner's property right would be swept away. In the end, no one has a right at all. Positive rights serve as a guidepost for power, not limits, and property rights are the basis for agricultural productivity. That's George 21. Stable property rights are an incentive for economic development through increased goods. Rural communities depend on ownership without recognized property rights. Farmers have little ability to control the resource if ownership were lacking. Likely would not be an industry at all. One of the most essential rights, the right to exclude. Government cannot create a right of access for the general public on privately owned property. The right to exclude is especially important in the agricultural industry, and if the individual uses the guise of another right as a justification of property rights are vitally important for the agricultural industry, and food insecurity goes nuclear. That's Cryptic 19. The danger of nuclear conflict increased to the highest ever. If humanity is to be wiped out, it will be with food, water under stress. Nothing can be ruled out. Chemical weapons, nuclear conflict remains a possibility. Regions stressed in food and their nuclear firepower, multiplying panic regimes in Russia. The U.S. would deploy atomic weapons to quell invasion by millions of refugees fleeing famine. Food insecurity is the driver and the use of nuclear weapons. Actually, just skip the counterclaims. Case page, first is that good economic data, restricts biases, promotes critical thinking, and prevents flawed decision-making errors. Anything else plagues public discourse with innumeracy that results in worse outcomes. That's if 17. A caricature of economics is that they fetishize models disconnected from reality. Critique is increasingly untrue. Economic debates are wrong by the best data one. Discourse is employed by numeracy. The capacity to count is no small thing. Data better, math complex interactions. Simple questions seldom have answers. Evidence drives science. Data has helped to restrict biases. Surveys show considerable agreement among liberals and conservatives. And outspreads techno-pessimism causes extinction. That's Burrell and Theory 19. Innovation is a fundamental driver of progress that is lost in policy discussions which focus on disruptive effects. Critics claim tech is dehumanizing and will eliminate what it means to be human. Critics advocate radical social transformation. If these come to influence the formation of policy, they could undermine innovation. It is hard to come by. We need much more, not less. Cultural attitudes are critical without a culture that embraces entrepreneurship. Innovation is thwarted. Historical records, unambiguous degree to which critics, unambiguous. And housing is go to HUSA. Housing is worse than the private sector and crowds out poverty programs. That's HUSIC 97. It is by no means true cutting out the landlord reduces costs. On the contrary, public authorities are bureaucracies with overhead expenses and have no incentive to control cost. Private ownership is cost control the expensive but ineffective. A maintenance regime with subsidized housing with bids and contracts replaces maintenance performed through far less costly economy. Homeowners and landowners maintain buildings and keep rents low through cooperation by choosing to invest in housing. Cities choose not to invest in other services or leave money in the economy to finance growth that would provide opportunity for poor and non-poor. And guaranteed housing empirically incentivizes employment and upward mobility, creates social isolation, allows for terrible living conditions that increase the risk of disease. That's 80/20. Housing subsidies led to diminished work effort, troubling since lack of work. Major social challenges faced by homeless families create disincentives for employment, social isolation. 13% of the U.S. Single-person household, 65% of sheltered homeless population is housing. Increased social isolation, individuals living in apartments with waste, bugs, untreated infections, health problems, and extremely isolated. And increased public housing doesn't solve limited public sector expertise and lack of land availability means housing is built in economically diverse areas that reproduce racial and economic segregation. That's sheets 21. Building subsidized housing is illegal. Local zoning laws prohibit structures other than single-family homes on a majority of land across cities and suburbs. Public housing largely built in poor, racially segregated neighborhoods because that's where government agencies could acquire land and where middle white-class voters didn't protest too vehemently. Absent any plan to legalize apartments and higher opportunity communities, proposals only exacerbate racial and economic segregation. Public housing operated by local authorities across the country, and most don't have experience with new construction. Public agencies operate under more rigid rules and processes than private sector, make construction more difficult, expensive, and guaranteeing the rise of housing versus trends of actual hard work with empty promises. We have precedent that screams. Okay, and I'll just send it.
Almost done.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm waiting on him. He says he's not ready.
Okay. Send.
Okay, while I'm waiting for that, can we start cross, please?
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't read the counterplans, right?
No.
Yeah, okay, cool. I guess, how is the affirmative techno-pessimism? Can you explain this argument? What does that mean?
Like, you read arguments about things like AI being bad, things like capitalist
Wait.
growth being bad.
So how is the AI bad? The affirmative doesn't even mention artificial intelligence.
Okay,
What is the link?
Sorry, okay. If I'll use the word algorithms, if that's like more.
That doesn't, okay, fine. I guess this argument about housing making people not work, what's the terminal for this?
What?
What's the terminal for housing makes people not work? Like sorry, let me find the evidence. Guaranteed housing empirically disincentivizes employment. What's the terminal for that? Why does it matter if people don't work?
Yeah, I think the argument is more about the way that the creation of social housing in, for example, segregated areas due to things like zoning laws creates like more social isolation because like local governments have zoning laws in place.
Okay, zoning laws are the problem. Got it. I guess
this argument about like the lack of land because of zoning laws. Like, what can you explain this argument again? This was the last one you read.
Yeah, I guess it's like specific to the way the app gets implemented. As of right now, there are like local governments in place who like are the ones who determine zoning laws. When the federal government passes a mandate that says, you know, like give X amount of housing to X people, that doesn't. What happens is they just build more houses in neighborhoods that are already like.
What does extinction outweighs get you?
Like.
Or your role with the ballot claims. What does that do? What is the implication?
I don't know what you want more than extinction outweighs.
No, like not extinction outweighs. I'm rephrasing my question. What does your role with the ballot claim get you?
Like.
What happens if I concede this?
Then like I'll weigh the dissents against that.
Okay, cool. I guess the second off. Oh, did you take it out of the doc? Okay. The second off. I guess. What is this domino effect? Can you explain the internal link for the government power trip stuff?
Yeah, just the way that things like property rights work. So inserting like the U.S. government into a market like housing, which sort of like hasn't happened before in the way that the app intends to expand it. Like doing things like having a legal right is like new ground, allows for a lot of like new expansions of this right.
Okay.
Especially like the Green Hat evidence talks about.
And so then how does that like cause food insecurity?
Yeah, it makes like it means that like farmers get scared because obviously if you're like growing crops on your land, then things like property rights matter a whole lot.
All right, that's cool. I'll start prep. Alright, stop prep, 115 remaining. I'll send the doc. Okay, it's sent. Order will be, let me just write 115. The order is going to be the affirmative, and then it's going to be Court Clog, and it's going to be property rights. When everyone's ready, I can start.
I'm good.
Okay. Cool.
The fundamental reason there is no winning 2NR is that they have dropped 1AC Mbembe, which has the capitalism necessitates creating dead zones, areas of the earth that are uninhabitable will never create more of these. The terminal being an uninhabitable planet leading to extinction. That goes dropped from the 1AC, so you should not give them new answers to our impact. That outweighs and turns both these sides. It turns food wars because climate change makes food insecurity inevitable. That's warranted in the Mbembe card and means that global cooperation is impossible, which means that all these impacts are inevitable, absent ending capitalism, which is try or die affirmative. It also turns the AI scenario as it means that we're never able to do any of the things that they claim that AI solves for because of the fact that the world is literally burning around us. We'll answer their arguments here. First, they say data is good, but they've dropped our theory of power, but they are additionally wrong about our app's thesis. It is not us, it is how we use the data, not the data itself. Using a computer like I'm using to read this speech right now is not inherently wrong, but the way that capitalism uses algorithms to filter out racialize the violence towards bodies epidermalized by the world computer as other is the problem, which is inherent to racial capitalism, which is our 1AC Beller evidence. They say we're techno-pessimism. We're not about we're right about algorithms. They have dropped that it is specifically in the context of housing that it is used to exclude black and brown people from access to it, which is part of the warrants explained by the 1AC. We should not have to extend much of it because they have dropped all of it on the public housing being worse. Mass scale giving homes means that it is not. And then we also saw the 1AC Chua and Katanga evidence says that it stops housing being used as racial capitalism's wages to bribe workers from not being able to fight back because of the fact that they will not have guaranteed housing. By giving guaranteed housing, it means that we are able to do this. They say housing makes people not work good, will impact turn. We don't think people should work for capitalism. We think that that is bad. They do not have a terminal for this. The disease is one line of the card and should not be given the risk that our impacts have. And it's the fact that we think that working is bad because it means that they become people who are forced to work for capitalism. It's key to our revolution. And on the part about the zoning and stuff, no, the affirmative solves this. We end zoning laws because of the fact that right-based approach would mean that we can't just do that. That is a core part of the right to housing. On the off-case positions, on one Court Clog, courts are overwhelmed now, 223. Litigation number double, litigation expected to increase 1522 in the U.S. This evidence is much newer than theirs, which means you default to it. 2 civil cases over housing disputes currently overwhelm state courts. Only large-scale executive action to increase housing can solve. Shanahan and Carpenter 19. Cases courts overwhelm resources 20 million per year tied to inequality housing. Branches failed and back safety nets. Funds for public housing low. 1 in 4, 19 million that qualify receive. Less assistance mean millions phase eviction process handled by courts. And on that means that they do not have a clear impact, but if they do, the affirmative straight turns it will concede extinction outweighs and util because we've read an extinction impact and think that the debate is about the unique consequences of the plan, which means you can weigh the good sides against it, but the case definitely outweighs due to our conceded impacts here. They say the data protection stuff, but that was all above the regulated AI impact. We'll answer the regulated AI stuff here. It is specifically this is a laundry list, so it should be rejected in favor of specific scenarios. We have read you a reason why, which means that the 2NR will read new terminals on this, or they do not have an impact, which is double line for them, and should be rejected on either way. On the second dissad, it is nonsensical because of the fact that the status quo is government overreach. The government is using this as part of the racial global regional capitalist system, which is explained by 1AC Beller, and means that government overreach is inevitable. The affirmative solves by abolishing the government and creating anarcho-communism. That was a conceded 1AC solvency claim, and means that we solve the terminal of this dignity rights stuff, and means that they do not access it. On the part about agriculture productivity, this is obviously not a good argument here because of the fact that they say that farmers will get scared of their property, but we don't think that people should have private property because we think it should be based around mutual aid, and that because otherwise it becomes capitalist. On the part about food insecurity is turned by the affirmative specifically since capitalism makes it inevitable, which means it is try or die for the affirmative here. On their arguments about going nuclear, that just is an argument for us because we have a much larger internal link to food wars due to the fact that capitalism will necessitate climate crises, which cause the ability for us not to have clear food supplies due to rising temperatures making us unable to grow crops, insects destroying them. Property rights are not the basis for agricultural stability either, and there is no domino effect. If it is, it's non-unique, and the affirmative solves the terminal, which straight turns both this out.
And I didn't read the dignity card. What's the order?
Court's case.
Case.
Courts.
Oh, courts?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I misheard. I thought you said the order is case. Courts, and then the case. Okay, let me just get a timer. Okay, I'm ready.
There's currently low amounts of litigation in the federal government right now. Caseloads have gone down since things like the pandemic, and And the plan only makes this worse. Increases new legislation like the right to housing, which sort of has no legal precedent, has never been defined before. Means that there's tons of cases that will happen to try to test where the bounds of this right go. And yes, it's a federal policy. Yes, it's definitely federal policy. That's pretty clear from the app that it affects the whole nation. Means that yes, it gets tried on the federal docket, which is specifically bad since that's also where things like AI legislation is being tested, which means that it gets placed second, since people hear more about housing rights than AI, since our evidence says that AI litigation is complicated and judges don't want to have to deal with it, which means that they prefer to focus on things like housing first, but that causes extinction, since it means that we never get clear rulings on things like AI, which means that we can't regulate AI, means that AI does cause extinction, means AI causes extinction, becomes more powerful than humans, and independently regulated AI is good, since it can provide data systems that can allow us to regulate things like climate change and be able to actually do things like look at the data and be able to analyze where we need to be farming or putting our resources to stop things like global warming. We'll answer the line by line specifically. First they say non-unique, but first is that their evidence is specific to local and municipal courts. Our evidence is about the federal government, which means that you should prefer it since the app is a federal mandate. And second is that they don't prove that we're already over the brink. They just say that there's a lot of cases, not that they're overwhelmed yet, or none of their evidence, doesn't prove that we're overwhelmed yet. And we'll answer the turn. All they say is that there's all they say is that there's going to be less eviction cases, but no, they misunderstand how the app works. The affirmative doesn't mean that people will stop suing on eviction claims. Doesn't mean that landlords will suddenly stop trying to pursue tenants or trying to kick them out, or doesn't mean that tenants won't stop suing landlords for kicking them out. Just changes the way that we interpret that, not the actual number of cases that go through the courts. It also strengthens the link, since it proves that obviously they're going to be changing things like litigation on evictions. Means that there's probably only going to be more cases as more people are willing to go through suits for things that wouldn't otherwise have been sued for, because they see that the laws have changed. And regulated AI outweighs the app. First is that it sort of answers their claims. They say that capitalism causes dead zones, but our argument is that things like AI are key to solving dead zones. I.e., when there are areas that aren't getting resources, only AI can sort of analyze the data and be able to figure out where those dead zones are, and be able to figure out how to solve for them, which is net better than mutual aid. And independently turns their offense, since it proves that capitalism doesn't cause extinction, whereas their claim is only that extinction might be inevitable. And also based on time frame should be the time. And time frame should come first, since we can only go extinct once. AI definitely outweighs on time frame, since it's expanding now. Litigation is on the docket right now, but things like capitalism have been going on for a long time. It was conceded in cross-examination that revolutionary movements have been going on for a long time, and all of them have been thwarted, and capitalism still hasn't been able to cause extinction yet, despite existing for hundreds of years. The rights argument. We'll concede that the rights argument is not unique, since status quo government overreach means that all we have to do is answer case, and it should be game over. The case page. On case, they haven't had a sufficient response to our zoning laws argument. Affirmative does not get to claim that local governments will change their zoning laws insofar as it's a federal right. None of their evidence says that they'll be able to change things like homeowner associations. None of their evidence says they'll be able to change like independent counties like in Dallas or Houston. Only that they can pass a federal mandates means that zoning laws will still exist. Means that which is going to be a turn to the app, means that they only increase the process of racial capitalism by creating more houses in areas that are racially divided. It's not a question of what the app implements, but it's a question of what the effects of the affirmative are. Our argument is that when the app is implemented, things like governors of different areas are going to and local actors are going to implement this federal policy in ways that increase things like bias and discrimination. Increase things like bias and discrimination because they want to build houses in areas where they won't receive tons of voter backlash or tons of middle class white moms protesting against them. And will extend. They say that capitalism caused extinction, but conceded our evidence, which says that no, it doesn't cause extinction. Insofar as things like dead zones are solved by increased technological advances. One example is AI, but for example, but our evidence also says that sort of their fears of things like technological advancement are sort of unfounded. We give you examples of things like AI being able to use data management to solve for problems, i.e. resource allocation and climate change.
I have 1 minute and 15. Order is the AF and then Court Clog. Okay. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Capitalism is a collapsing giant that inevitably destroys the earth. It means that companies don't care about the environment or resources and only care about extraction of profit. That guarantees extinction because of the creation of uninhabitable dead zones of the planet, wherein mining companies extract entire portions of the earth in order to get resources or destroy forests in order to clear land for farms. That inevitably means that capitalism causes extinction. This is conceded warrants coming out of the 1AC. Their push for defense here from the 2NR does not matter insofar as they have not read evidence that says anything to the contrary. They have read things about data being good, but rather that does not necessarily mean that capitalism is sustainable, or question the fact that racial capitalism necessitates a ongoing redistribution of resources. That means that it will not solve problems for the global south because it was never meant to. This means that we are winning a definitely large risk of an impact, and the fact that it does not make it sustainable because they did not read the McAfee card that they were trying to extend in the 2NR. The only card they have read that they can try to extend is this stuff about data being good, but that is not necessarily about something that has a unique link to the affirmative. You can check his Mark doc to tell that the 2NR was lying to you here, because all this says is that data is good. It says nothing about solving any of this, and means that capitalism definitely caused extinction. That outweighs on probability. We've read evidence that says that this is happening now, which means it is much more likely. Additionally, we'll win link defense and a risk of a link turn on Court Clog, which means that there's a very high risk of the AF and a very low risk of the disad. But if there is a risk of the disad, the AF solves the terminal to it, which was also conceded on the arguments about they saying that we don't get to claim because the federal right durable fiat means that we get to make states implement it the same at the level. That means the federal government does make the states do it, and even if they win, that the housing that it provides is low quality. When housing is guaranteed, i.e. that people are able to have a guaranteed access to a house, it means that it is not the wages of racial capitalism, which means that revolutionary organizing works. That was a conceded warrant from the 1AC and the 2AC, which means that we're definitely winning a large risk of case, and we'll go on to the decide. They say that it is about local and not federal, but it is non-unique because it specifically says, our evidence specifically says that there is doubling and ongoing increase in this. That means that you can risk the fact that climate litigations will also increase at the federal level. But even if you don't think we're winning uniqueness here, it will win that the app solves this because of this is kind of weird, but our evidence also says that litigation over housing, our second piece of evidence from the 2AC specifically says that housing goes through state courts, which means that we are winning a risk that local matters here because it is through state courts. That is conceded, which is also defense of their scenario. It's hidden in the evidence, but it specifically says that state courts are where housing disputes are over. We're going to extend that link to here. It's more likely than the link because it says that there's 20 million cases per year tied to inequality in housing. When we end eviction via the plan, that means that there is no more people suing or asking for litigations in order to be guaranteed public housing, which means that there is no more risk of a disad here or a link because the massive number, we have read evidence that says there is millions of cases that are open, which means that the affirmative definitely solves this. They have not given you an articulated number on the AI solving us. No, AI does not solve this. This is unsubstantiated by evidence. AI will not do anything because we have won a unique disclaimer of how capitalism operates, and capitalism does not want to save the planet, which means it will not, because the problems will initially not affect people in the developed global north, but will rather affect those in the south, which capitalism does not care about. Vote F. High risk case, low risk disad.
Can one of you all forward the email chain to a different email? I don't have the email like on my phone or my computer.
Okay, yeah, I can.
Can you forward the whole thing to Riley11905 @gmail?
Riley119.
05 at
Okay.
gmail.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put it on there. Sent.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
You all ready for decision?
Yes.
Okay. So I voted F. This was a really great debate. You should be very proud of yourselves. I really enjoyed this. So I think the case turns out ways the dissad. The only impact that both of you have was climate, and I think the F has a stronger internal link to climate than the negative does, for two reasons. One, even if AI has the capability to solve for the impacts of climate change, it won't because companies don't care about saving the environment, and I think this is compelling, especially when most of the apps claims about like how the world works and capitalism itself is conceded by the negative. Two, I think the app is right to point out that the negative evidence is very bad on this question and doesn't win. One, it doesn't really like make this like mitigation argument that you are like making in the 2NR, and also I don't think you have won like a capitalism sustainable argument, which means that even if AI can like maybe stop capitalism, it doesn't solve in all instances, which means that like capitalism will just repurpose itself, which I think is only something that the app can resolve. I look at this zoning laws link turn on the case page, and I think that the app is right to say that just implementing the right to housing in itself is enough to stop racial capitalism, and I think that just saying that zoning laws like exist post-plan like isn't sufficient enough to kind of turn the entirety of the case, especially when this argument is not really substantiated by negative evidence. Do y'all have any questions?
No, I don't know.
Speaking style, do you think anything that you would change or that would make it more persuasive for you?
No.
Okay, cool. Appreciate it. Good debate.
Yeah.